What so proudly we hailed, earth the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And it continues on, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave. Now, America is a nation that is often covered with a whole lot of turmoil because of how we're viewed outside of America. This happens to just be right before Memorial Day. Memorial Day is often symbolized as a day where we remember those who were fallen as troops. We remember those who were fallen, who gave some form of service to our nation in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, I actually learned some more information that Memorial Day has some other history to it that is often not spoke about. History that has ties back to the struggle for this nation as a whole, back to the Civil War. Now, since I just heard this information recently, I wasn't even able to add this in because I literally heard this on a radio program so recently that I'm not going to touch on it. But I will say that it does help, it does benefit to look at your history so that you can learn from your history so that you do not have bad things repeat themselves. But in looking at America's idols, now, a lot of times we may wonder what exactly is an idol. Now, according to dictionary.com, it's defined as being a noun. An idol is an image or a material object representing a deity of which is offered religious worship is addressed. In the Bible, an idol is an image of a deity other than God. It also is defined as the deity itself. Any person or thing regarded with blind admiration, adoration, or devotion, a mere image or a semblance of something visible but without substance, such as a phantom. A figment of the mind, or fantasy, a false conception or notion. So, idols, they can be many things. Idols, they can be people, they could be things, they could be images, they could be places. And idols can even be thoughts. A lot of times we want to wonder about where do we see idols? Idols have been around since probably the beginning after not too long of time because men always want to make something visible, tangible. We can see this podium here. And a lot of times, idols were used for religious purposes, not only back in Bible days and throughout history, but even today. There are people that still use and have some type of importance that they place on idols. So you may see people that are praying to gods that they made of stone, gods that they made of wood, gods that they made of metal. Praying to pictures, worshiping animals, and even in some religious sects, believing that people will be reincarnated as various items when they come back. I believe that's in Hinduism. They believe that people will be reincarnated into different forms. Now, looking at this a little bit, in Isaiah 45:20, I'm not going to go there, but it does speak of people praying to wooden gods who cannot save. But in Leviticus 19:4, the New American Standard says, "Do not turn to idols or make of yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God." Because God is God, we have to trust him. We can't allow ourselves to be caught up into the various things that may be considered idols of our time. Now, I'm pretty sure some folks, when they were looking at this sermon title or heard me say the sermon title, they quickly associated with the television show American Idol. American Idol is a TV show that is aired for multiple years. It's actually been reduplicated across 20 different nations right now that have some form of America's Idols. And we're not going to focus on the TV show. We're going to focus on the idols and various things that we have to deal with today. Many of them being images, some of them being people. Some of the people that could be considered as idols would be often athletes, celebrities, wealthy socialites, political figures, both past and present. These people can often be considered as idols. Images, and we've already dealt with images because different type of idols being made. And even sometimes when people are pursuing a quote-unquote perfect body, we may look at various sculptures, we may look at even various pictures, or quote-unquote the definition that our society has for what's supposed to be perfect, what's supposed to be acceptable. Often, even in these pictures, even in these quote-unquote people who are supposed to be all elite, they have some impurities. It's not always on the outside, but it can be on the inside. Other idols that we look at in today's society, houses. Not that houses are a bad thing, but when people become obsessed with their property, when people become overly obsessed with something, and it just takes up all their time and they're just so busy, like, okay, I'm going to cut my yard today. I'm not going to church. I'm going to, you know what, I know I could go to my kids' game, but you know what, I actually just started planting my garden. When we place too much emphasis on some things, when we become obsessed with various things, even like cars. Some people, they may wash their cars up to 3 times a week because they become so obsessed with it. As a nation, America can be obsessed about our military. America has bragged about our military and our military might, and we've held it in high regard for a long time. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that any of these things that I mentioned are totally bad. It's not wrong to like or to adore something, but when we cross over where we make that thing more important than it should be, when we start putting on an inordinate amount of affection on that thing, then it can become an idol. Today we have several different things that we're going to focus on before we get out the way of power, money, and sex that I think are 3 of America's biggest idols. Now, sex often today has become an idol because sexuality is placed in front of us in not only advertisements, but it's placed in front of us on, just subliminal messages sometimes, with crude language even used in the workplace. Yes, sir. With innuendos, yes. With high-ranking people coming down because of the Me Too movement, or because of people finding out that, oh, well, this person was molested at an early age. And sex and sexuality has become an idol in a lot of ways because of the fact that it's tied into our mindsets. It's forced upon even children. Amen. I hate to say that there's some cartoons that you cannot allow your children to watch because of the stuff that actually comes on. I I was watching a report on the Parent Television Council, the PTC, where they were talking about the amount of just vulgar language and the amount of other things that invade regular television that is easily accessible for children, and if you're not really watching the content, you'll miss it.
Yes, sir.
And you may come home and your child may be using some language that you didn't teach them. You may get in the car and then your child may use some language that you were like, how'd you learn that?
Yes, sir.
But unfortunately, sex and sexuality has been pushed and pressed in front of us more and more every single day. It's a lot of times even where we have like such a movement with people trying to say that they were born a certain way.
Yes.
Now, personally, my opinion is that it is a choice ultimately. And I say that because we would not say to someone who is a thief, oh, you were born that way. Because the thief may say, I woke up and I always want to go steal, so I can't help myself because I want to go steal. I was born this way. And so you know what? I'm going to take this because I just felt like taking it. We wouldn't find that acceptable. Theft is not acceptable by God's law. That's not acceptable by man's law.
Amen.
Now, I could really dig into people being born a certain way and stuff like that, but that's a whole side conversation. I know that I will have some folks throw up their hate, anger, or whatever. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to stand on the word.
Stand. Amen.
Now, other things that tie into sex are even things of just the issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking has grown not just locally, it's something that we deal with as a state because of I-75 often being a corridor between North and South. And there's some groups that have really stood staunchly against human trafficking because of the fact that human trafficking has taken such a large effect and it's continued to grow. From various massage parlors that are kind of shady to even various sex rings where young people have been trafficked from state to state and basically made into sex slaves to pleasure people.
Yes.
This is a real issue. This is a real challenge that we have today, and it's continuing on in our society. So, yes, the idol of sex and sexuality can be a very large stronghold. It can affect a lot of people. It can break up marriages. It can cause a whole lot of issues because you may have people who are forcing people in their workplace to try and do some stuff just so they can get ahead. And if not reported, then you do have continuous people who are affected by the Me Too movement. You have people who are continuously affected by other situations and circumstances that they didn't expect to enter into. Even in prison. Some people, they go in one way and they come out another way. Unfortunately, it's a reality. A lot of the issues that deal with sex. And it's something that we have to, one, make sure that we teach the fact that sex is not bad. When sex is in marriage, it is acceptable.
Yes, sir.
Sex outside of marriage is not acceptable.
Yes, sir.
The marriage bed is not defiled. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 24, the New American Standard. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife, and they become one flesh. Oftentimes, and this is something I look back at because I was a virgin when I went off to college, and I remember doing some studies after that, biblically on my own, and I was like, you know what? Ultimately, if you only have sex with your spouse, then you have no one to compare sex to. If you think about it from that perspective, then you would never have a conception of good or bad sex. Because you would know your wife. A wife would know her husband. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I think it kind of speaks pretty clearly for itself. Other idols that we deal with today are idols from the perspective of money. Money being an idol. When money becomes an idol, it can be placed up higher than it should be in terms of its level of importance. Money today is very important to not only individuals, but also to business. Money often is something that we have to exchange for doing some form of commerce. We're not in the traditional days of old where people used to barter and trade. Now, in some cases today, we may barter and trade some things, but not as much as we originally did. Pretty much there's going to be some form of cash exchange for goods or some form of cash exchange for service. Whether it be through traditional cash, whether it be through card, whether it be through Bitcoin, whether it be through credit card, whether it be through a line of credit, whether it be through a check, whether it be through a money order. We're not walking into the bank to say, you know what, I just had a good crop this year and I would like to exchange my mortgage payment this time, and I'm going to bring you, I grew a whole bunch of radishes. I got all of them out there in the truck right now, so we're going to exchange these radishes in the truck for our mortgage payment.
Amen.
That's not acceptable. Because commerce has changed, because time has changed, we don't use barter and trade as our primary method of transferring payment in America now. We definitely are very focused on money because money is something that is extremely important. It's not all bad, but it can have some bad uses if we let it go there.
Yes, sir.
In 1 Timothy 6:10 in the New American Standard, it reads, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and perceive themselves with many griefs." Because we allow ourselves to sometimes wander away for the love of money, it can become an idol. It could be sometimes where people are putting in so much work that they lose their concept of family, that they lose their relationship with neighbors and friends and even having an outside life.
Yes, sir.
Now, money is not all bad as it reads in Luke 12, verse 48, from the King James Version. In the second half of the verse, it reads this: "For unto whom much is given, of him shall be much required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more." A lot of times when we're given a lot of responsibility, when we're given a lot of things to have focus on, money is often one of those things that we need to make sure that we use wisely.
Yes, sir.
And money often ties in with power. Power being extremely important from the standpoint of we have to be good stewards of power. We have a nation that has been vastly pushed and pumped up about the fact that we have a lot of military power.
Yes.
A lot of times, one of the things that America has stood strong on, and this being Memorial Day weekend, is the fact that we have a strong Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines.
Yes.
A lot of times we focus so much on the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines that we lose focus on other things that are important. We lose focus on the fact that not only is our military, it can be a good thing. It can help protect us. It can help us to be able to help others when they have times of need. But some countries and sometimes military power has been used incorrectly. If we look back at colonial days when the British Navy and Army was sent over all across the world to colonize, and often they would leave a garrison of troops behind so that they could control a much larger population with fear and intimidation and, of course, military might. Oftentimes, when we allow power to become corrupted, we'll lose sight of what's right and what's wrong.
Yes, sir.
In history, a lot of times, some things have caused us to lose sight of what's right and what's wrong and cause power to become corrupted.
Yes, sir.
When our power becomes corrupted, then it changes from a fair society, in some cases, to becoming more of a dictatorship.
Yes, sir.
It changes from being what God had originally set up to becoming something that has become perverted.
Yes, sir.
There are some various leaders who had power that went to their mind. Often people would think of leaders like Hitler, who let power corrupt him. Some of Hitler's principles, and some may find this controversial, but some of his principles were not all bad. He did want his people in Germany to think and feel better about themselves.
Yes.
Beyond that, I think we could throw a whole lot of other stuff out because it went way overboard. But ultimately, feeling better about ourselves, having more confidence about ourselves is not a bad thing. But when we let power go overboard, then we can have crazy situations that come up. And that'll become more like an idol. So, considering money, power, and sex, and how these three things can become some of America's largest idols, we definitely need to continue to remember that these things are tools when used in the right place.
Yes, sir.
If someone has power, not just physical strength, but power in terms of influence, they need to aim to use that in the right manner. There's a lot of times when celebrities and even various people who have a large voice, and oftentimes since we've become so technology driven, people with enough Instagram followers, enough Facebook followers, enough people on Twitter, enough people on their YouTube channel, they can become bigger influencers than we even realize. And it doesn't matter how many people you have on your Facebook